everybody, welcome back to another Hearthstone card reveal, and it's only a single card this video, just one, but I think I need an entire video to describe it. So this was the card that people were speculating was going to be Whizbang. The icon that was shown on the Hearthstone news page was like the hand from the image, and indeed it was Whizbang. And the card reads, Splendiferous Whizbang, 4-mana 4/5. You start the game with one of Whizbang's experimental decks. Obviously, this is a nod back to the Whizbang the Wonderful, whose effect was very similar, but it generated a wonderful deck, which was one of 20 random decks you'd get assigned. There was basically a pre-constructed deck, so you'd put this into your deck at the beginning. It basically changed your class to Whizbang, and then as you load it into a game, you get one of the 20 decks with that class, and that's what you would play as, right? This seems like a nod to that, but the experimental decks are much wilder, let's put it that way. Anyway, obviously before you can really ascertain what this is going to do, you have to see the experimental decks, right? Because it is going to have the same effect. You're going to put this in your deck at deck creation, and it's going to lock you out from putting any other card in there. It will just say you're starting with your class's experimental Whizbang deck, I assume. So there are 12, I believe, experimental decks. One for each class in the game, you will notice. I think there's one for each class in the game. There is Copycat Deck. The deck is a copy of your opponent's. Deck of Discovery. Your deck is filled with cards that discover druid spells and minions. By the way, I'm going to go through each one of these one at a time. Cards in this deck transform into random playable cards, each turn while in hand. Deck of Heroes. This deck is heroic. Uplet Deck. This deck has 7 copies of Astral Automaton. Shrunken Deck. This deck, oh, by the way, when I said 12 classes, sorry, it includes neutral. Shrunken Deck, this deck has 20 cards only. Deck of Legends, the deck has 2 copies of Legendaries. Deck of Treasures, the deck has 5 Jewel Treasures in it. Deck of Villains, the deck is evil. Questing Deck, your deck has 3 quests. Rainbow Deck has cards from all classes and spell schools. Fantastic. And Deck of Wishes, the deck contains 3 wishes that give you the perfect card. Alright, let's start addressing these one at a time. I'm going to put a big warning notice on the screen. A lot of this is speculation. Some of them are easy to tell exactly what they're going to do, like the deck is a copy of your opponent's deck. That's easy, right? Some of them, though, are going to be a bit more niche, like the Deck of Treasures. What do you mean it just has 5 treasures in it? What do you mean the deck is evil? You know, that type of thing. What do you mean the deck is heroic? Anyway, I'm going to give my thoughts on what these will be. So first we have Copycat Deck. This was like the neutral version of the experimental decks. Your deck's a copy of your opponent's. Very easy. You load into your game, and you will just get copied for your opponent. Only question I have is if you're both playing Whizbang, what if both players get that roll? I assume the game, like behind the scenes, goes like, oh shit, both people rolled Copycat. Therefore we should re-roll one of them and you will copy that variant of Whizbang's deck. But who knows, maybe it'll just crash the game. Deck of Wonders. Cards in this deck transform into random playable cards each turn while in hand. These are the morphing cards. These are what they're going to look like. So each turn that's in your hand, transform it into a random playable mage or neutral card. It's kind of like Shifter Xeris, but it has to be a playable card. So there is a bit of a locked criteria to it. However, playing a card that is effectively... I mean, this is almost an arena deck, right? But you can play it out on curve. This isn't going to be particularly good. And I'm going to say that I don't actually like Whizbang's... I didn't like the old Whizbang mechanic. I understand why it was good for the game, to get people back into the game, because you really only need that one legendary to play the game. Same with this one, and it is a nod back to the past. But it's just too random, right? But maybe people crave this. Anyway, you're basically going to be playing a mage arena deck. Do I think that's going to be good? Not really. And again, you don't get to pick this, you get a random one of these decks, so... and also, Deck of Wonders... Is it not just outshadowed by Deck of Discovery, the Druid version? You get to get these Discover ones, the Moments of Discovery instead. So rather than getting a random card that you morph into each turn, you get to discover one of 3 cards instead. And it is something, again, you can afford to play. So you are going to not have that problem of, discovering something you can't play for multiple turns in a row and just doing nothing for the first few turns. You can play these and discover something that is, I mean, you can play this and discover something that you can save to use later, unlike the morphing cards, which you can't do, but you still can, meet the same criteria, just more consistently, so I don't fully like that. Like, I feel like these and the mage one, and it's kind of why I put them together, are too close in effect, and I just feel like the druid one just outclasses it. But there's probably some niche situations. I guess you can get into situations where you might discover a card that you don't want on the druid side of things, and you're forced to keep it, whereas at least on the shifting cards, you know, eventually it'll roll into something that you really want, right? Also to bear in mind that if you're shifting every turn, it's something you can afford to play, so even on like turn 10, it might shift into something into a 1-cost card, whereas at least with Moment of Discovery, you might discover like 3 1-cost cards and get unlucky, but you're a bit more protected for those bad rolls, right? So I think this one is better than the mage one, but we'll have to see what the druid class pool is going to be. Right, here we're getting to the speculation mode. Big speculation warning. I don't actually know exactly how this works yet. So Paladin says this deck is heroic. By the way, for each of these cards, I assume it turns you into that class as well. So the mage shifting one will give you the mage hero power. The druid one will give you the druid hero power. This will give you the Paladin one. On the card art for this, though, is showing the League of Explorers. So I assume this is going to have the League of Explorers in the deck. And my speculation, again, I can't stress this more. I think it's going to have both classic and basically the old Doom League of Explorer cards. And I think it's going to be a Highlander deck. So I think it's going to have Finley Murgleton from the past in it. I think it's going to be one or the other or both. Let me put it that way. I think it'll have all the Highlander cards so you can get upgraded hero powers. I think you'll have like Bran in there. I think you could even have Dino Tank the Bran in there. I think it won't. I don't think these will all be Paladin cards in the deck of heroes. I think it will be mixtures of different classes where the Explorers have shown up in. I think I'll have OG Bran in there as well. I think you'll get these 2 versions of Elise. I think you'll get these 2 versions of Reno. And then there'll be some sort of like backbone around the deck. But as I said, my speculation of this will be it's Highlander. So I think it's going to be 30 random cards. And most of the backbone of the deck I think will be Paladin focused. I did have a look back because 4 of these cards came from Savor of Uldum. So the Highlander cards of the League of Explorers, that's like the big theme of the set. But the rest of the set for Paladin cards doesn't really gel well with the rest of them, if you know what I mean. So I think it's going to be like picking some of the more classic cards, some more of the more modern cards. I think this one could be really interesting to see. But again, I don't know. I assume this heroic deck, by the way, isn't random. I assume it's preset, right? I think this is going to be one of the preset decks. Uplet deck. This deck has 7 copies of Astral Automaton. I assume it has more than 7 cards in it. I still assume it has 30 cards in it. Just in case you don't know, Astral Automaton is this card. It's in standard right now, so I'm kind of surprised that this is making one of Whizbang's experimental decks. I thought it'd be more focused on the past. I have a horrible feeling, and this again, the Diamond Spellstone and the what's it called, the Obsidian Statue thing. They're sending me into PTSD. I have a horrible feeling this is going to be a Resurrect Priest deck with more of the old Resurrect cards in it. And honestly, this could be really, really obnoxious to roll into as some classes. Again, this is another thing about Whizbang. You have to kind of balance it, that the deck is something that can compete with opponents, but it can't really be this god tier better than any deck that exists in Standard, right? Because I think these decks, again, will have more of a wild feel to it. Like, it won't just be Standard cards, it'll be stuff from the past as well. So they're going to have to be a bit careful about that. But again, until you see the full, I assume it's a 30-card deck with 7 copies of Astral Automaton in it. Who knows? But definitely it's going to be a deck that if you let it go into the late game, they're going to be summoning giant robot dudes. Warlock's is Shrunken deck. The deck only has 20 cards. Again, we're going into speculation mode here. There's a couple of cards through, I mean, even in Standard right now, and the past of Warlock that have really wanted you to burn your decks and have as few cards as possible. Thanatom, who's in Standard right now, is one of them. The cards cost is equal to the amount of cards left in your deck. If you have a smaller amount of cards in your deck, you're more likely to get Thanatom up earlier, right? So I wouldn't be surprised to see that in there. Also stuff like Neru Fireblade, where it rewarded you for emptying your deck out entirely to give you 3/2 imps that fill the board. Don't be surprised to see that in there. Similarly, Bloodshad Bristleback, another card that had this text about Warlock having fewer cards in your deck to get an additional effect, or even just an effect, to be honest with you. What I don't think is going to be in here, and I've put it down on the screen just in case, Obviously, the questline, the Demon Seed, would be one of the great rewards for having fewer cards in the deck. As that deck really, you just want it to burn through your deck as quickly as possible, whilst hurting yourself, and eventually get into the condition, if you're not aware of the Demon Seed, that you get a, I can't remember what the Townsend card is called, but you get a card that when you play it, it says that any damage you take on your turn is dealt to your opponent, and then you just self-fatigue yourself. I don't think they'll do that. I think they're going to try and play as many of the Warlock cards into this 20-card deck that have effects related to having small deck sizes without putting the Demon Seed in it. So we'll see, but if it is Demon Seed, then I think it's going to be unpopular. Let's put it this way, because the Demon Seed has generally been a very unpopular card, just because of the way the game is played. I think it makes Hearthstone not feel like Hearthstone, right? It feels like your opponent is playing a completely different game and isn't really interacting with you. They're just doing their own quest line, right? Deck of Legends is Hunters. The deck has 2 copies of Legendaries. Again, I think this is going to be a hark to the past and some of the classic Legendaries that Hunters had access to. I would not be shocked to see 2 King Crushes in there. It's about to rotate out. But this is probably the classic Hunter Legendary, right? There's no way this isn't in there. Equally, I think something like Cathena Winter Wisp, which was back in, I think it was Witchwood, right, when she got released? Maybe it was early. God, I can't remember now. I can't remember when Recruit was. That wasn't Witchwood, that was early. Was it Kobolds and Catacombs? Maybe that is going to be in that deck, because again, this is a card that would be considerably better if you could put multiple copies of Legendaries in your deck, right? Especially Beasts, since, you know, Recruit's Beasts. So I'm kind of going towards the side that I think this is going to be a big Beast Hunter deck. But we'll see. Other Legendaries, Gazrilla, very classic, old, and again, another Beast. Acidmore, another Beast. Maybe you have, like, I think it's called Dreadmore as well in there for the combo wombo. I'm just very, very intrigued how this works, because it can't just be a deck of 15 double copies of Legendaries, right? There's surely some other, you know, spells in there or something, or some other neutrals in there that help you get to these big Legendaries. But in theory, this sounds like a pretty fun deck. And again, I think this is going to be a set deck, right? It's not going to be a randomly generated one. When you get Deck of Legends, you'll know what you have and what you're playing with. Okay, this is the one that I think causes me the most confusion. This is Rogues, which is Deck of Treasures. This deck has 5 Jewel Treasures in it. Funny, because Jewels is about to get unsupported in Hearthstone, but they're nodding back to it anyway. At the very least, these Jewel Treasures were in dungeon runs and that type of thing, or a lot of them were based on the dungeon run cards, and they were really popular, so I'm not surprised they've put a nod to it, but it just made me laugh on the timing. I don't know how this is going to work. I assume... Okay, my gut judgment, because, again, sample size, small sample size, there's a lot of treasures and jewels right now. I don't know exactly how many. And another key thing is, not all Jewel Treasures are made equal. They come in different tiers, right? There's like tier 1, 2, and 3. So, I assume you're getting 5 random treasures, but I assume you can't roll into 5 tier 3 ones, nor will you roll 5 tier 1s. Again, there's no explanation on this, at least as I last checked on Twitter and the internet in general. No one exactly knows. My best bet is this is going to be... I think it's going to be either a 25-card deck or a 20-card deck that is preset, and then there are going to be 5 or 10 treasures in it. I know it says 5 Jewel Treasures, but I'm wondering if it's going to work a bit like... I mentioned this. I think it's going to work maybe like Kazakhstan, where it says, like, if you've played 4 of the Dragons this game, craft a custom deck of treasures. Maybe it gives you 2 copies of each of the Jewel Treasures. I don't know. I probably would lean to more the 25 side of things, just on the wording. And then, yeah, it's going to have 5 treasures in it. And I assume there is going to be some sort of seeding in there to make sure that you get, like, 1 tier 3, 2 tier 2s, and 2 tier 1s or something. Very interesting. There's obviously some really high-rolly things you can get, like Wax Rager, I think, is one of the tier 3 treasures. And that's just a minion you can't remove from the board, really, unless you have, like, Silence or Bounce. So, yeah, that's going to be a really, really interesting one, and potentially volatile as well. Again, here comes speculation. Warrior has Deck of Evil. By capital Evils, I assume this means lackey type thing, so I'm kind of leaning towards lackey cards, and probably with that Galakrond. I think this will be a Galakrond Warrior deck. It was pretty popular back then. It was one of the... It was like one of the tier 1 decks, right? It was there or thereabouts. It was very fun to play. I like lackey, so I hope it is lackey. There is a world as well, if you think of like evil characters within the Hearthstone universe, it might be Boom. So maybe it's a Boom mech warrior deck, but I think with the terminology and the capitalized evil, you're going to get lackeys, right? And which point you're in Descent of Dragons, and it's probably Galakrond, right, with it. Okay, Shaman again, this is speculation again, the word of the episode, speculation. Your deck has 3 quests. Okay, this one I don't know about. I really don't know how to read this card. So, in the history of Shaman, there are 3 quests. Command the Elements, Corrupt the Waters, and Unite the Murlocs. In theory, all 3 of these could be a quest in a Shaman deck. And you could build a 30 card, well, 27 card, I guess, if they count in your deck. A 27 card Shaman deck that would meet all these quest lines. A lot of Murlocs have Battle Cries, some of the Murlocs have Overloads. You know, you can easily see spells with the Murloc package that have Overload on them. And that's all well and good, that could all work. However, surely the quests come preloaded, right? You don't have to spend the mana, because the quests go into your opening hand. I mean, and I guess one of them is a quest line, not a quest. Like, that's... If you get these all added to your hand at the start of the game, then it's going to be so brutal to your opening hand. Also, I get the feeling on the subtext that it's not going to include quest lines, it will just be pure quests. In which case, it's going to be quests from other classes as well included, right? So I just don't see a world where this is going to work. Full stop. My other theory is maybe this is actually 3 unique quests that will be just preset. Like, your deck will just come preloaded with, like, maybe it's not Unite the Murlocs, it'll be something else. Like, it'll be say, oh, play 4 Murlocs in a turn or something like that, and you get this. I have no idea. My actual gut is leaning towards that you will get 3 random quests, and they will be preloaded into the deck. Like, you won't have to play them. Or maybe once you've completed one, the other one then shows up. I have no idea how this is going to work, but I'm interested. I'm really interested. Also, let me know if you've got any better speculation than that, because I really don't know on the Shaman one. Death Knight has Rainbow Deck, a bit of a nod to, you know, Rainbow Death Knight that is all the rage right now. There's not a lot to read about this. Your deck is cards from all classes and all spell schools. I don't know if the deck has to have 1 from each class, 1 from each spell school, or if it's just... I mean, the way it reads suggests you have to have that. And I'm sure at some point some cards become fairly consistent because there's not that many Fells, right? There's not that many Holy cards. But it's just going to be an arena deck. It's going to be like trying to play Contraband Rogue or Test Rogue type things, but without Test, the big reward at the end of it. So I think this one is going to be pretty dooky. And then finally, Deck of Witches, which was... I think it was missed off at the original launch, and then someone else has found the image of it. Or, sorry, maybe it was missing from one of the diagrams and was pulled from the video instead. Your deck contains 3 wishes that give you the perfect card. I assume this is similar to the way Zephyrus works, and it's going to give you the perfect card from like the core or classic cards. Because it's too complicated to code it for all cards that exist in the game or all cards that are existing in standard, and then keep that up to date. So I think it's going to work the same way that Zephyrus works, and I think it will be a 27 card deck with 3 wishes in it, as simple as that. Now, will that deck just be like a spell Demon Hunter? That would be interesting if you had stuff like, oh my god, I should have wrote his name down. Jotun. If it has Jotun in there, and you get the Deck of Wishes just casted for you, that could be really, really interesting. A lot of value. I assume this is going to be some sort of value Demon Hunter deck. Again, until you see the list of the 27 cards, who knows how good it is. But I suspect it's going to be like Whizbang, right? The decks are decent, but they won't be tier 1 decks, so... All in all, fun card. I understand it, but I don't like it. I don't like the gimmick. I think it's not healthy for the game. Whiny, whiny, whiny. Anyway, thanks for watching this. I'll do some more videos as the other reveals come out. Unless the reveals, you know... If all the reveals from now are just 1 card per day, which they won't be, obviously, I'm not going to do a video of 1 card each time, but if it's 1 card that has, like, 1,000 cards in it, then sure, I'll do a little video on it. But yeah, anyway, I look forward to seeing stuff more based in the realm of sanity. Goodbye.